shared working space where people can come and work and so forth, and you can rent out the room. I've used restaurants before in the past, but the minimums are pretty high for events like this. So welcome everyone, thank you so much for coming. We had a small technical issue that tends to happen when you live stream things, so sorry for that we didn't start right on time. But I'm Mike Mutzel, and this event is sponsored by Zymogen, so we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the formulas. And the impetus for this event was several conversations that I've had with our guest speakers here tonight, and panelists. Part of the impetus and conversations was this great book, Stealing Fire. Dr. Jan Venter sent it to me, and about flow states. And I started thinking that some people really stick to their exercise program, whether it's yoga, whether it's CrossFit, hiking, action sports, and it becomes a lifelong hobby, and they don't need to muster up the motivation to get to the gym. You just go after it. And I started to think that possibly flow states could be the missing link between exercise compliance and making it, versus kind of this ebb and flow where people maybe every January they get on a bandwagon, they don't get a flow state possibly, so they're not really into that type of exercise, and then they don't make it a habit. So I wanted to kind of drill down that with Dr. Jan Venter, and then we're going to have a panel discussion all about exercise when it comes to clinical practice, talk about some different components when it comes to time-restricted feeding, the ketogenic diet, which is obviously who here knows about it, pretty much everyone. Who here implements some aspect of time-restricted feeding ketogenic diet? A lot of you. We're going to learn very shortly, too, about how the ketogenic diet affects the brain, which I think is really, really exciting stuff. And then we're going to get some perspective when it comes to building muscle for hypertrophy and for hormone balance, and from a physician perspective, physician-athlete perspective. So, Dr. Jan Venter, why don't you come on up here and be the first victim, first guest. So, Dr. Jan and I, about a year ago, did a podcast. This is going to be like part 2 of that discussion. Did anyone see that by chance? What? Yeah, it was all, we talked about some different, so we did a podcast. We talked all about flow, and we talked about the ketogenic diet and how it affects cognition and the brain function. And I thought that was really fascinating. So since then, I've been studying flow states and the connection between ketones and beta-hydroxybutyrate and how that affects neuroplasticity and cognition. So maybe we can kick it off there with what you've noticed, because you're actually objectively looking at cognitive function in your practice using neurofeedback. So maybe let's introduce what neurofeedback is and what you've noticed with nutrition and brain function.
Okay. So with neurofeedback, I found that certain people react extremely well to it. And for those of you who don't know, neurofeedback is you put sensors on the scalp, usually about 21 sensors, and then you look at the brain waves. And these brain waves can then be quantified by a computer. You basically get numbers to it, and these numbers can be compared to a database. And to see if you are in a normative database, are you doing healthy? Are you more towards the depressed state? Are you more towards schizophrenia? Autism, even dementia. And very quickly realized that if your brain cells are not healthy, your neurons are not healthy, you're not going to get the full benefits of getting neurofeedback. And also do something called neuromodulation, where instead of reading signals and playing feedback into the brain, you send a signal to the brain to help reset it, whether it's a magnetic stimulus like TMS, or electrical stimulus like transcranial DC stimulation, or something like they've been working on the palms, which sends an electrical signal through your tongue to reset your palms in the brainstem. That if you're low in B12, if your diet sucks, if you're not getting good night's sleep, if you're not exercising, it just doesn't stick, and you end up doing 40 to 50 visits where people are optimized. Within 10 visits, you can see a great effect.
Mm-hmm. So nutrition has a huge impact on how lasting the therapy is on the individual.
So almost everything on the bottom of the matrix, so in functional medicine we have this matrix where you look at nutrition and hydration, and relationships, stress, sleep, and networks. And I got very interested in how flow states, and specifically what Jamie Wheel and Stephen Copper call non-ordinary states of consciousness, because you can get into a flow state to either tribal dancing, mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, surfing, prayer, meditation, lots of drumming, rhythmic sounds. And a lot of this has been discovered thousands of years ago, and we rediscovered that technology. And by using that state, you can help to heal the brain. Some people who has a concussion that won't be able to mountain bike, so I wanted to harness and see, okay, well, can we do in a lab environment or a clinical environment, can we help people to get into a flow state safely, and then see if that helps healing, and that seems to be where our research is going.
Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of research now in anecdotal use of microdosing LSD and mushrooms and things like that. Is that something that you dabbled in clinically, working with individuals and things like that, CEOs? Has anyone experimented with this personally, or know, or heard of this research that's coming out of Johns Hopkins, I believe, for depression? Does that assist individuals in getting into a flow state?
So it gets people into one of those non-ordinary states of consciousness that Jamie Wheeler and Stephen Covey talks about. I'm more interested in see how can we do it the natural way, do it with exercise or with sleep or with neurofeedback, rather than dabbling into medicinal substances. But I had the fortune of meeting a patient who was one of the, I believe, 20 that did the MAPS psychedelics for PTSD. And she was very, very, I think she took 1 or 2 MDMAs, and really helped her PTSD to a point. And there was a lot of counseling. So it wasn't just, here's a pill, see you next week. It was a full-on FDA-sponsored trial. She was one of the only Canadians, I believe, that was in the study. And I believe it was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So as Stealing Fire said, there's a lot of CEOs who do that, and they go to Burning Man, and it's almost becoming commercial now, where it's the cool thing to do. I think there's other cool ways to do to get into flow states. One of the things we're working on is to build a flow dojo in Surrey, the Brain Center redeveloping, and then we're also having a great play flow dojo in Whistler next year, where people can safely get into flow states, whether it's looping swings, or there's a surf swing that goes laterally and 360. There's also a nice gyroscope. It's all lit up with rhythmic beats that you can feel the, it's called a sub-pack, you can feel this sub-woofer frequencies with which we are, and that helps you to put you in flow state as well. And then doing breathing techniques, so holotropic breathing is where you breathe very, very fast for about 20 or 30 minutes. That can put you into a flow state as well. And then just sort of what people like Dave Asprey called stacking. So you can find the perfect stack that works for you. So in the flow dojo, we'll make sure that people come in, optimize their state of health, whether they need some help with nutrition or some help with sleep, some physical exercise, maybe there's something wrong with your knee, get the alignment right, and then get them to a point where and analyze their flow using brainwaves technology to see what stack that person needs to get into flow state.
So stacking different modalities, whether it's drums, breathing, things like that.
Things like heart rate variability is a great way to get in, helping with sleep, something as simple as sleep apnea. If you have sleep apnea, and you can be overweight, obese, or skinny fat, if you have sleep apnea, you're not getting a good night's sleep, and that could hinder you from getting into a flow state. Most people in the audience and on live stream would remember times where you felt your best and you performed your best, and you chased your whole lifetime away trying to get that back. And one of the biggest hindrances I found is if you don't get a good 8 to 8.25 hours of sleep at night, and you don't get those 5 restorative REM cycles. And as you know, you don't clear your brain, and you get a debris, there's more risk for Alzheimer's or dementia, and then you don't get into a flow state. So you chase your whole life trying to get that flow state. And some people, yes, go into psychedelics or alcohol, and I think that it's probably not necessary to go that route if you know the actual stacks to do for yourself.
So maybe substance abuse is a compensation of lack of getting in the flow naturally, potentially.
I think substance abuse is very complex, but I think that is one of the things that's chasing the high. You just want to escape. What they say in Stealing Fire, they wanted to get away from the words flow state and actually call it ecstasis, is where your sense of self diminishes and you become sort of aware of a bigger part of the world. And I think that will help solve these bigger problems that we have. Stephen Copper talked about his books in Abundance and Bold about these almost $1 million problems, like how are we going to help people with food and solving water? How are we going to solve this carbon pollution, that kind of problem? And we need people in that sort of state of awareness to come up with lateralizing ideas.
So I think someone at the door down there. Did you have the fob? He's on it. Thanks, Drew. Did we interrupt you, or did you finish that thought?
Yeah, so we need basically an army, and Jamie will call it almost like an army of new soldiers that can be this state aware, that can get into this non-ordinary state to help people realize these solutions.
To bigger problems. Thinking more holistically.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And then not necessarily using substances to get there. I always like going to events where I don't have to drink, I can really enjoy with people and be happy with the music and dance. I think one thing is the functional medicine conference that we held. And that's a flow state. You get that flow state during the day where you get group flow, where there's knowledge pouring out, whether it's a fire hydrant from Jeff Bland or something you wanted to know, and Mike gives you a nice nudge at lunchtime. And then you have this wonderful event at night where there's music and song and just happiness. And alcohol may or may not play a part of it.
And there's the element of flow that we haven't really talked about was the risk. And that's why like action sports, potentially high risk, helps to facilitate flow. And what element of risk induces that flow state?
So it's usually the risk of death, I think, is the biggest concern. But they figure out that the percentage of risk above the challenge, so it can't be too easy, otherwise you get bored. So what they found is that this has to be 4% better. It's 4% better, 4% more riskier than you used to. Doesn't have to be 100%. So having no gravity, so zero gravity is one of the biggest things, and then having full gravity as well, so max G's, and then also a full sort of 360 rotational force as well seems to help people. And then if you could put it in an environment where it's not you doing 360s, double back down and down Whistler, this is you in a gyroscope, safely strapped in, maybe blindfolded, maybe you had a nice artisanal chocolate and maybe a coffee on board, which is very safe way to get into flow, rather than thinking I might die today.
Right. Exactly. But I've noticed that, so I used to race motocross, and that really was a great way to get into a flow state, and then also like backcountry skiing. Because it is very risky, there's avalanche, and you just hit the powder. So it seems like, you know, when we see these children doing seemingly silly things, backcountry skiing or motorcycle riding or skateboarding, it seems like they're trying to get that hit of flow or stasis. Like this great book I definitely would recommend, Stealing Fire, whatever your business or leisurely athletic event is. So that element of risk, and then we kind of talked a little bit about some of the benefits that flow offers to the brain, and I'd love to finish off with nutrition. So having these flow states, in addition to like the bigger picture in life, like we talked about solving more complex problems more holistically, how does achieving flow affect the brain in terms of repairing for maybe a TBI, depression, anxiety, sleep issues, and much more?
So the interesting, when you're in a flow state, you have access to more information streams. They call it the Umwelt, or basically just there's more information, so you can see things faster, you process much quicker. So that helps the brain to sort of analyze itself, seeing, oh shoot, I'm in trouble, and reset itself. A lot of what we find in traumatic brain injury, stroke, is the increase in noise. So there's this, an increase in signal-to-noise ratio. So if you can reduce the noise part, and that's what flow can do, is you really switch off, we call it the Woody Allen part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. That part is like, you're not good enough, you can't do it, you're going to die today, all those kind of thing. If you can switch that off, your brain has more processing power. It's basically like unplugging some of the unnecessary electricity. And so your brain can then work on not having to work on the damaged part of the brain. You can actually work around it. So you can bypass it. Interesting. That's why I was really interested in flow. One of the big reasons I got into it, Stephen Kotler talked about in his book, The Rise of Superman, which is all about these super athletes, about he had Lyme disease, and he's a writer for New York Times and big publications, and he had severe cognitive problems, and he was going to end his life. He couldn't make any money. His editors were basically saying, this is not good, your sentences don't make any sense, you're not going to get paid. And he was going to end his life, and some of his friends took him surfing, and he's like, this is crazy, why are you taking me surfing? I want to die. And they put him on a surfboard, and even for a mystical second or two, he had this ecstasis or flow experience. He's like, what is this? And he's a very scientific person, and he's like, I don't believe in weird stuff. I need to figure this out. And long story short, they kept him going back, and I met him about 2-3 years ago. He's, as far as I can tell, unbelievably well. He was flourishing.
Cognitively.
He's written like 4 books since then, 4 or 5 books.
Very detailed books.
Very detailed books. So I believe flow is one way that we can harness to heal our brains and to heal our bodies.
Very interesting. So I know anytime any of us have a bad day, things are not going right, it's cloudy and so forth, getting some exercise helps to clear the brain of some of that. So could it be that just weightlifting, yoga, is that enough? Is that like a microdose of flow potentially, or does it need to be an element of risk?
There's a flow cycle, so you have to struggle a bit, and that sets off your cortisol and your adrenaline. Then there has to be a release, which is nitric oxide. So I usually recommend people is to have a bit of beet juice or nitric oxide on board. And then you get into a flow cycle where you get the dopamine and the anandamide and endorphins and serotonin flowing. And then very important, then there's a restoration phase. So you need to get your 8 hours sleep. That's when I get people to do heart rate variability. Really big believer in flow tanks. There's some wonderful flow tanks around in the area. And get magnesium on board, and then it's much easier to do that in that flow cycle. Yes.
Flow tank. So that's in the book. I've read this book twice. It's in the sauna. That's why it's all beat up. But so Navy SEALs use the flow tanks to learn faster. So what I've been doing is listening to an audiobook in the flow tank. So this is, you can talk about what it does, the sensory deprivation, how it affects the brain. That's a small little tip. So Navy SEALs, normally it takes about 6 months to learn a foreign language, another language. Navy SEALs use the sensory deprivation of flow tanks that Dr. Venture will talk about to learn a language in 12 weeks. So it can be a great way just to accelerate learning. So if there's a complex topic or an area that you want to excel in or really master, like one of them is kind of a fun book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, about heuristics and how we have this really intuitive part of our brain and then kind of the analytical part of our brain. So I just want to really, there's a lot of great research in that when it comes to even health and eating and all that. Anyway, so you can when you're listening to like an audiobook like that, I notice that I can almost like word for word retain what I listen to while in the flow tank. So what is it about that sensory deprivation that helps the brain and the body?
So I think it goes down to that signal to noise ratio. If you don't have, for those of you who've been on a flow tank, you literally don't know where your body ends, because it's the flow tanks used to be quite cold in Vancouver, and one of my patients actually complained. So now most of the flow tanks are body temperature, so you literally don't feel where your body ends. And because it's very dark inside, it's very, as you said, centuries of the pride, your brain does not have any other things to worry about. So I think that's one way that you're getting some of the other systems online. And then using audio, and Jamie will did say the best way to do it is to have headphones that are waterproof. Much better, so they almost get like binaural beats going. And what they do is they also do heart rate variability before. Now if you can do it during, that's even better, but we don't want to electrocute anyone. But that would be the best way to do it.
So do 10, 20 minutes before, so you really hit
Get
that.
right it, and do some holotropic breathing as well, maybe even lying, which is just really fast breathing. I don't remember if it's in this book.
It's just one page, it's very quick about it.
Box breathing, which the Navy SEALs do.
Mm.
You might have mentioned in the first chapter. So it's basically just breathe 7 seconds in, hold it, 7 seconds out, hold it. Just breathe, and then you do that for about 5-10 minutes. That will put you also in a higher state of consciousness. So then you go and do heart rate variability, or you can do it the same. They've got a great video on the Flow Genome Project website called The Art of Flow. And you have to really scroll down, which is binaural beats with waves, surfing waves, and that puts you in a state of flow within 5 minutes. So if you do that, get into flow, then get into a flow tank, have your waterproof, and that'll be a great way to get on top of all the audiobooks you've listened to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think
Don't
it's
do
great.
it while driving.
Yes, right. Who's been in the flow tank? Anyone? A few of you? Yeah. Who recommends it to their clients or patients? Quite a few of you. It's awesome. Yeah, I think it's a really good tool. And people may not, I mean, if you haven't been exposed to some of this research, you might think it's another, the latest gimmick, whatever, like another tanning salon type place, and you may not realize that there's a lot of science, and this has been studied since like the 1950s, right?
That's right, yeah, at the Esalen Institute, which where, I don't know if you watch, if anyone watched Mad Men or used to watch, that's the last scene apparently when he's looking out over Esalen, which is just outside of San Francisco, Big Sur. And our first flow camp with Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler was at Esalen, so it was sort of a great full circle to get back. That was really the start of the ultimate human performance or human potential started. Cranial sacral therapy started there at the Upledger Institute at Esalen. So it's a great birth story there.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that flow camp. You told me about that a few years ago. Can anyone go to that, or is it
Yep.
invite only? Okay.
There is sort of you want to start with doing the fundamentals, so it's an online course, and then as you go through that opens sort of then you can go and do a live event.
Cool.
And there's anything from Flow and Snow that was out in Utah last year. We had a flow camp in the middle of Powder Mountain. They're beautiful, it's just tents, basically like glamping. We had a flow dojo right in the mountains. We were right there when the eclipse was happening. And we had a rock star of a kite surfer, Jesse Richmond, who was able to loop the swing. And this is like 8,000, 9,000 feet above ground. So we were all suffering. Our oxygen saturation was about 92% because we brought our oxygen saturation. So we were all suffering. And this guy just got a loop 3-4 times backwards and then forwards. And we caught him right as the eclipse happened. He was basically apexing, which is quite well. And then I'm happy to say I'm one of the first black belt flow ninjas.
What does that mean? Is it?
I'll have to kill you.
Top secret stuff. All right.
No, it means I've done all the courses.
Sure.
So you're sort of a black belt or a lineage, and then you start basically by teaching people about flow, and you go deeper and deeper into it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think this is a great tool for especially practitioners to learn more about it, and at least know that it's there, because you mentioned, I mean, a disease like Lyme disease, it can be very debilitating physically, but also neurologically. This is, I mean, getting into a flow state help, Stephen, like you were saying, which is cool.
And it's something like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia as well, which people just don't have the motivation, or they have pain when they go out. They still have pain on a gyroscope, but if you put them in there, they actually feel better afterwards. And the cool thing about flow, it actually will lag some people 6 hours, some people 2-3 days. So you think 10 minutes of flow, you get 2 or 3 days of benefit, yes.
That's awesome. So some of the physiologic benefits, you mentioned signal to noise ratio is improved, heart rate variability is improved. We noticed that the ketogenic diet also affects those proxies of health. So I wonder, it wasn't talked about in the book, and maybe that's my bias trying to, hopefully he would say something about ketosis, but it wasn't really mentioned. Anecdotally, you're a big fan of that, the ketogenic diet for cognition. Is there any overlap there that we should know about?
I think a lot of it is it's not been studied in the state. One of the reasons I want to when we bring the Flow Dojo to Surrey and Worcester, so we can actually study this in a research environment. We can do double-blind, placebo-controlled, and see what works. There's ketogenic diet with coconut oil work with MCT. Is it better to do it with grass-fed beef? Is it better to do it with eggs? And we can measure your levels of ketones in your blood. I think the fact that people with concussions do extremely well, and with early onset Alzheimer's or cognitive decline, and there's a lot of studies that shows that work. I think it'd be helpful to see what is your ApoE4 status before, because I think people with an ApoE4 double allele probably does better with ketosis, and they need it probably more than the average person. But as a state of almost like delirium when you get those first 3-4 days, we'll probably try it. Probably easier to get into a flow state as well. So those are great questions, I think, which I'm happy to research.
That would be cool. So the clinic, when is that open?
So we are doing a soft launch in next week, the 30th of October, and we're aiming to open summer 2018. And we'll have our Flow Dojo ready in Worcester as well in Surrey.
And so they don't have to be a patient of yours. People can benefit from this.
Yeah, the hope is to have this really for the wellness. As Jamie wants to really restrict the amount of dojos, so we want to keep it high class. So we're hoping that it will be open to the public, whether we have an event-based or a subscription-based. It will probably be the gyms of the future. I think we're all tired of the smell and the fury that goes on with gyms, but this will be the new style. He's incorporated a lot of things like acro yoga, which is really more play, adult play and kids play, and then also incorporating a lot of kids and seniors. So as we age, we have got an aging population, we really want to help our seniors as well, who know they need to exercise, but because of degenerative knees or hips or ways and means, they can't get into it. So this is a great way. Our Flow Dojo in Surrey is actually right next to a senior shop, close to high school, so we're quite excited.
That's awesome. Okay, let's finish off on some micronutrients. So PQQ, coenzyme Q10 are things that you've noticed increase the amplitude in neurofeedback.
Good memory.
Yeah, so let's. I think this is important for people to understand some of the nutrients there, and also ketosis. So let's talk about maybe what the clinical significance for brain cognition and so forth of the amplitude in the neurofeedback, and then what you observe with those nutrients.
So specifically, and it depends on what the state the patient is. So concussion, your amplitude, basically your brain is stunned, the connections are being disrupted, so your brain is really slow. We call that delta waves. So it's really like your brain is asleep. We measure brain waves. For those you know, we only see delta waves really when you're asleep. So you should not be making delta waves when you're alert doing a brain map. So doing something like PQQ or coenzyme Q10 or ubiquinol, very helpful to stimulate the mitochondria, which is really how ketosis works as well. Just really purges the old mitochondria, helps your mitochondria re-energize. Vitamin B12, specific hydroxycobalamin and methylcobalamin, very, very helpful to get the amplitude up. Magnesium is an unbelievably powerful front. Been playing around more and more with magnesium threonate because we know that it enters the blood brain very much better. But still very happy with magnesium glycinate. Really you see the brain waves, there's a lot of anxiety, high beta waves, that works really well. Seeing that zinc, incredibly important for the brain, especially for the blood-brain barrier permeability. Some wonderful research at the T. Scarachi and at the Functional Medicine Conference about intestinal permeability secondary to concussion. So I think that is a really important avenue to look at.
Like TBI concussion causes gut permeability.
Correct.
So top down.
Wonderful research done, animal models and human models. Unbelievable.
Which would be like a double whammy, right? Because then gut permeability would lead to brain dysfunction, so it's like a vicious cycle. Right?
And then the cool thing is if you do vagal stimulation, that helps the gut permeability and then it helps the brain permeability. So I've got all my patients doing heart permeability, using heart math. And then there's some really cool things coming down the line with neuromodulation using vagal stimulation. So whether you use direct on the vagus, or if you use the pons, which is a way to stimulate the vagus through your tongue. So it's a little bit more convenient than putting a vagal stimulator in your brain.
Right. Yeah. Slightly. Hey. Now, is that available retail now at this point, or?
We just finished the study. It was an international study. We submitting to FDA as we speak. And then it's a question of 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. We'll hopefully have it available in the States and as a therapy. Currently, it's will be used in a clinic setting, so it'll be a physical therapist that has neurological background and training. And then we also got Health Canada right after that. So.
Interesting. That's fantastic. Omega-3 fats, you didn't mention, but is that part of it?
That is such a ubiquitous thing. All my patients do omega-3. Hard to find kids that like the taste, but luckily there's some awesome options out there.
Totally. And just as a side note, you've been experimenting with the monoglyceride form recently from Zymogen. What have you found, just anecdotally?
A bit early to tell still.
Yeah.
I haven't quite had my full kick at it yet.
Yeah, it's just been like
Stay
30
tuned.
days or so.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right.
So what's unique about this is it's a monoglyceride. So normally what we have is ethyl ester or triglyceride-based fish oil that need to be emulsified by bile and pancreatic enzymes and so forth. So this is just basically pre-digested. So if you've had gallbladder removed, or you've had a lifelong of margarine and polyunsaturated fatty acids, this can help to get in there a little easier. So last question. So at-home devices, a lot of people, we mentioned the HeartMath device, which is great. I think it's like $99, which is awesome. People can meditate on their own, but there's also like apps like the Muse, which is the brain sensing headband. Does anyone have the Muse device? So it's made in Toronto. It's a Canadian company, a really cool device. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so my other role is I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Health Tech Connects, and we developed an app called Brain Power that you can download for free on iTunes. And that will give you a score out of 1,000. It uses evoked potentials in a mathematical equation, reading the brain waves. And it will give you a score so you can say right before you take a monoral, or Relax Max, or your bulletproof coffee, or your ketogenic diet. See what your brain doing, and then do a score afterwards as well. We did it with our Flow Dojo camp. We did one in Worcester with mountain biking. Almost killed ourselves, but some of us did it before and after, and there was a dramatic increase. Some of people have been using it for a while. That was the biggest increase in their brain scores. So it's a basically just consumer-based model. So it's something to play around with. You just need a Muse. That's about $200, $250. And then we also have something called Brain Vital Sign, which is more clinician-based, which takes about 5 minutes, but we use a really brain cap for that. Gives you a score out of 30. So it's like you would take your blood pressure in the office. It's 120/80. It's 140/90. For someone who's always mistaken, there's a problem. And this Brain Vital Sign device, which we're waiting for FDA and Health Canada as well, will be available to any clinician out there and tell it, what's my brain doing? And then if you're on a sad diet, standard American diet, you switch and you've got a really low score, this might be an impetus to say, okay, well, I'll try this keto thing or this paleo thing for a while and see if it makes a difference. And if it does, hey, we've got some objective evidence there.
That maybe something going on. So your device or your app uses the Muse data?
Yeah, currently uses the Muse. It's platform independent. Currently the best device that we can use is Muse, and we are working on something quite cool, which are like brain strips. So instead of putting the Muse on, there will be strips behind your ears on your forehead. Good quality brain data, and the cool thing is you can swim with it, you can do mountain biking, you can do double back diamond, you can do motocross, you can wear it on a helmet, and see, okay, how did your brain do, and what moment did you get stuck, and what can we do around getting out unstuck.
Yeah. So everyone listening or watching or here has a brain that they're interested in preserving and optimizing, the function of that. So Do you recommend like once a year as every adult? Because we're all susceptible to this. We can trip and fall, crash skiing, get hit by a car, or whatever. Doing a vital signs or some sort of mapping just to get our baseline to see if we're regressing cognitively.
Great. So a good friend of mine, Dr. Dale Bredesen, calls it a cognoscopy at age 45. So just like you have to have your colonoscopy at 40 or 50, depending where you are in the world, you should really have a cognoscopy, so a brain vital sign assessment at least at 45, so you can see what is my risk. And he does a whole panel of nutrients, he does volumetric MRI, he uses genetic studies to see, okay, what is your risk? And he's been shown with quite a few publications so far that you can reverse cognitive decline, but you have to start soon. You can't wait until you're 80 and say, okay, now I'm going to change my diet. Now I'm going to try this CrossFit thing. You can't start it at 80, you have to start young.
Yeah, that's awesome. And every year, the cognoscopy.
Yeah, I think some people, it's almost like a stress test for the heart. If you have a high risk, you probably want to do it every year. Some people probably can do it every 5 years. See. And most of us know something is wrong. I had a patient yesterday at 60 said, oh, just old age, I can't remember my this and this and that, and he's a salesman. I can't remember people's names. But this is serious. And I've got people well in the 80s, 90s, 100s, fluent memory. This is not aging. If you're starting to have that, it might not be a sign of dementia, but it might be a sign. It's definitely a sign something's going on. And it's cool to check out, okay, is it because your diet, is it because you exercise, you're not sleeping well, is it your B12, is it your magnesium, is it your glutathione levels are low? I mean, this is the cool thing about functional medicine. There's so many ways you can go down.
And personalize it.
And personalize it, exactly. Excellent.
That's awesome. This was really great. Do you guys have any questions here? I mean, the point of this is to kind of share, stories and all that. And then I'm going to look at the live stream here. But any questions for Dr. Venter on some of the things we've been talking about?
Yeah. Have you tried taking nootropics on ketogenic diet, and have you ever looked into see how that's affecting you or people you work with?
Not currently. I grew up in South Africa, so we used a lot of the nootropics there for people with concussion and stroke. We did the IV version, worked really well. When I came to Canada, it wasn't available to get it through. So not currently. There's a lot of companies that call themselves nootropics. I think the cool thing is I wanted an objective evidence to say, and I think we now get to a point where with using brain vital signs, you can use brain power. Say, okay, well, is this really working for my brain, or is it just because I'm feeling better? So I think there's a lot of, number one, I think most of these things are quite expensive, and some of them are definitely in a great area of harm. It might not be so safe for your liver or renal functions.
Can I just follow up?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I've tried a lot of nootropics on a lot of experiments with them, and I found that being on a ketogenic diet, I feel the effects of nootropics a lot more. So that's what I was curious. Something to it.
Yeah, I use vitamin B12 as a nootropic for patients and myself, and certainly those ones who are on ketosis or ketogenic, it makes a huge difference. So the mitochondria is in better state to be, I think, susceptible to those. So it makes sense.
For your B12, is that oral or intravenous?
I've played around with oral. I'm not, and I've tried the best of the best liposomal. I'm not. If somebody is in my office because they're not well for their brain, I go to IM. I do Myers-Briggs tests for people. It's quite laborious to do them once a week. I teach people to do it IM themselves, or you can do sub-Q. And I use methylcobalamin or hydroxycobalamin. So that works really, really well. And some people get away with sublingual. I would say most people, like 90%, it's getting to inject themselves.
Good question. Weekly?
I start off, depends. So I do something that's really cool. Use a 256 hertz tuning fork. And then you check your vibration, you check your patient's vibration. And normally it should be about 30 seconds that you would feel peripheral vibration. And if you're losing that, you've got a peripheral neuropathy. And I'm surprised how many people, like 5 seconds, it's gone. And you can buy this at any London McQuaid or music store. And if somebody has neuropathy signs and have cognitive signs and they're tired, I would get them injections once a week. I usually get a level, either a B12 or a serum of methylmalonic acid, which is really hard to get in Canada. You guys in the States, much easier. We can get that before, and then I do it weekly for about 4 weeks, and then I test them, and I usually do it monthly. I've had people that to do it every day in the beginning, just to get them to levels. In France, I know they do 10 days at a time, one day, 10 days in a row, and then once a month. So I've always remembered that from medical school. So there are different ways, and B12 is extremely safe. It's very, very rare that you would have any problems, as long as you don't use cyanocobalamin, which, as the name implies, there's a cyanide molecule in there somewhere. So
Yeah, it's crazy. That's
Probably
in prenatals and children's multiple. It's insane. But
that's pretty crazy. Hopefully we can get it out.
yeah. I have a question for you if no one else does, but I think, did you?
Yeah, just might be a long one, but you mentioned TMS therapy for depression. What is your take on ketogenic diets and exogenous ketone supplementation in terms of reducing anxiety and bipolar-like symptoms?
Yeah, so now you bring the question is, and really what it is depends what is the cause for the depression. Sometimes the cause for the depression could be, especially in Vancouver, is low vitamin D. So you can probably throw all the TMS you want and all the ketosis, just get the person's vitamin D up. If we imply that all those nutrients are right, I think something like ketosis is very, very helpful. I've had quite a few patients who did very well with that. TMS, if you look at the current, and don't quote me on this, but you're only looking at about 30%. It's not very high. It's very specific protocols. If you deviate from the protocols, you get much better success. So what I do with neurofeedback and the brain mapping, you can see which part of the brain is different. And you can then focus your TMS therapy or transcranial DC stimulation or whatever other stimulation device you have. There's some interesting things going on with transcranial ultrasound. And if you do that in a medical setting, at the right place, right time, and the cells are optimized, I think you get a much better. So,
Well, this is the reason I'm asking, because a lot of my clients do have bipolar or even BPD-like symptoms. They have put them on ketogenic diets and with exogenous ketones, and over the course of 6 months, even shorter, they calm down quite a bit. But in terms of crisis, though, that's what I'm thinking. There's a suicide attempt or something like that. So the brain mapping would be beneficial.
yeah, so it just helps you to see what's going on, and something that that was maybe a big tip for those of you who don't use it already is lithium orotate, which is not currently available as a supplement in Canada, but you can get it as a prescription compounded.
Oh, you can get
In Canada.
Yeah.
You can get it. But very good for irritability, very good for bipolar, very good for aggression, and very good for suicidal. And we're talking 30 milligrams. Wonderful article at actually the recent functional medicine conference. Unfortunately, I don't think it was archived, which is too bad.
James Greenwood, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you interview?
Yeah, he opened everyone's eyes, I think, to lithium orotate, which is awesome.
Yeah. So that's something that I primarily put in.
But higher dosages in that acute kind of crisis.
Yeah, I think depending on kidney function and thyroid and that, if you can monitor it, yeah, definitely wonderful successes with that. So on top of that, so you really have to meet and personalize with a client or a patient visit at a time.
Yeah, I've had good success as well with higher doses of Benadryl,
Okay, yeah.
as for people who are like mania or psychotic symptoms. So it's a little animal thing that they can calm you down a bit.
Yeah, I found with neurofeedback as well, I've got quite a few successful clients who've had neurofeedback and we balanced the two halves of the brain. It seemed to work quite well. And you're just getting their sleep.
Yeah.
They need to sleep, so whether it's magnesium or...
And you mentioned supplementing magnesium. What do you think of Epsom salt baths?
Yeah, I love the flow tanks because it's 900 pounds of magnesium compared to 2 cups. But yes, absolutely love magnesium Epsom salts.
What's your take on getting kids to take magnesium in terms of supplementation is really choice?
I give them the liquid. There's a couple of companies that's available locally that you can get liquid. So yes, especially if they're constipated and they don't eat their greens. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful. Love language.
That's awesome. Go for it.
Is there less variance in requirements, in sleep requirements than we maybe imagine, that there's so much variance in people's needs? But you seem quite specific about 8.25 hours.
Yes.
All of us know people who say, I'm fine with 5 hours a night.
I can call a few people out at podcasts, but there are people who say, oh, I can sleep stack and I can get away with 4 hours. If you watch these people over time, they don't look so healthy. They don't act so healthy. And if you look at this, the current sleep mechanics, your brain need to go through those 5 cycles to basically purge itself. I tell people it's like flushing a toilet. If you're not flushing your brain 5 times a night, you're only flushing it once or twice, stuff has to go somewhere. And you're not going to notice it right away. It's going to be years down the road. It's like smoking. People say, oh, I smoked 20 years ago and it was 2 packs and I all stopped. I'm all healthy now. You still have a major risk for cancer. And I would not stop screening. So I think our people get away with that. If you look at things like the brain vital signs we're using, use the brain power score. You just use a tool and see what you do. I mean, there's obvious exceptions. People can get away with it. It depends how young you are. I think you're 18. I mean, I was med school. I was in the army. Some days you didn't sleep for 3 days. And I think I functioned okay. Can I do it now? Even with all the stacking and all that, I'd be severely worried if I was a patient seeing myself. For instance. But you can get away with it. But talk to me in 20 years.
Yeah, I think you're referring to that book that came out. I can't remember the name of it. Different personality types, the bear and the wolf.
Yes, that's
remind me of the guy.
Is it Michael Breus?
Yeah, in Southern California. So we tend to talk about that. And if you look at that from like the teleological evolutionary perspective, like in tribal era, the impetus for having different sleep cycles and different people that would stay up late versus early birds and all that was to help protect, communities of people. So that at some point in time, and Dan Hardy's doing some research on this with someone at University of Toronto, I think, or McMaster, anyhow, that there's natural ebb and flow in everyone's sleep cycle, just a little bit from that perspective, so that if you're in a village and there's intruders, the probability of someone being up at one point is highest. So
I saw it personally with my wife, where she was a reasonably light sleeper before kids, and became a very, very deep sleeper during it. And I became the light sleeper, so I think it's part of it that's true. I'm a very open thinker, a lateral thinker, so I don't believe in boxes. I think once people say black and white, and there's no gray, I think you get in trouble. I think there's lots of mixes, and I accept that. There are clearly people who can do that, who just function on little sleep. They can do. The classic example is Einstein and Edison, where they did power naps. So they slept on the couch and had put keys in a ladle, and it will drop. And that's how they became obese eventually. And I think they probably went into flow states because they were so exhausted. But then if you look at the analysis of Einstein's brain, because they were able to steal a part of his brain, and then looked at the connections, and he had much less connections. He actually had atrophy of his brain. You would never have known that if you had it, but there was some. So that's why you see there's stuff what looks okay. If you start going deeper, it's like, oh wait a minute, there's other stuff on there.
interesting. One thing that I found with sleep, anyone want to jump in and anecdotally on this, going in the sauna before bed seems to really help promote deep sleep. And using the Oura Ring, I don't know if anyone has that, but it does track sleep architecture. So the ketogenic diet, I've noticed, does improve sleep architecture, deep sleep and REM sleep, and then also going in the sauna before bed.
So you're doing an infrared sauna?
Yeah.
So and that's probably mitochondrial frequency, so that gives you, one thing I saw a lot of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia patients, if you don't have energy, you're not going to sleep. And that's typical of the patients told me. They're wired and they're tired, they can't sleep. If you haven't slept for 3 days, how can you not fall asleep? And it's because they don't have the mitochondrial energy there. So, and for those, that's where the ketosis really helps. I think it really purges just an alternative fuel source.
Interesting. Yeah. Any other questions? I guess I had one more question on the gut and SIBO. So we see this so commonly where people say, well, you know, I did the antibiotic protocol, the SIBO elimination diet, elemental diet, and so forth, and it came back. I still can't have onions, I can't have everything. So if there is this trauma-induced change in the permeability and maybe the motility of the gut, could SIBO really be kind of a brain disorder? Have you kind of thought about that?
Yeah, I think that we see that quite a bit in concussion patients. A lot of them have got bloating gut symptoms. At least 20% of concussed patients also have either a pituitary gland that functions. So you have to sort of go through that, make sure there's no fire dysfunction. But yeah, I think this whole vagal nerve dysfunction is untapped. We need to really look into that.
Yeah, very interesting. Dr. Brencher, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My folks want to connect with you. If they're watching the feed right now, where can they do that?
Probably easiest to talk to you for now.
Okay, all right. I'll comment. I'll update the YouTube description if people are still watching right now. All right, so we'll do a little transition here. We'll bring the couch over, bring our 3 physician athletes, and talk about more moving muscles and all that good stuff. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.
This was a lot of fun. All right, guys. So what would make all of you most comfortable? So we have this big couch, or we could just put chairs on the side. Whatever you think. You want to? Yeah. Slide.
So like one of those light shows.
Yeah, right.
They laid with
Maybe we'll leave one chair out. We could all fit on the couch. All right. Take a minute. I'm just going to check the feed here, make sure we're sound is low.
So that's been corrected, but issues on your chapter rate.
It's fine. So the sound, you cranked it up a little bit on the
Yeah, it took me a little while to figure out what was going on. Yeah.
Okay.
So you could use compression.
Can we put the live stream camera here? Would that be all right?
If you want,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, just one quick second. Yeah.
You think that would be better?
Yeah. Let's. I saw some people complaining.
Yeah, so it's also a cross.
Oh shoot.
Until, about maybe a minute in.
It's all good.
So that was mostly just introduction stuff, so it's
Yeah.
pretty steady. The audio is very steady.
And it should be 30.
You could come up a little more.
Okay.
He's perfect.
Let's. Why don't you grab that camera?
Yeah.
We're just trying to help out live stream people so that the audio is a little better.
Yeah, you have to die.
Drew, do you have any jokes? Jokes.
Jokes for life. Are you gonna mic us?
Well, I'm trying to get this. We had issues with this microphone, but I'm trying to make sure that we can use the microphone just for recording purposes. So I apologize if this takes. Let's just do this. You just let me know when you're. How about this? You guys look so great on the couch. I'll just grab a chair and sit off to the side. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay. I'll just get a little.
Or we could squish. Yeah, probably.
Or you want to squish,
There's
Mike?
lots of room.
You guys are the
We can
experts.
squish. We can all get cozy.
How's this? How are we looking? Cool. All right. So it's a little, we're going to go a little old fashioned with the microphone, okay? So we'll just put
can
this,
just put that
yeah, and then we
in.
can just kind of use this. This is just so that we get a really good recording. Will that reach you? All right. So this event how it planned was Dr. Drew Jamieson and I were talking maybe, I don't know, June or so.
Yep.
And Drew has been a lifelong athlete, collegiate football player, and he was, had recently changed up his personal training program and started doing more CrossFit, intermittent fasting, and all this sort of thing. And I said, Dr. Drew, it would be really fun if we could do like an event where we can kind of talk about this from the clinical perspective, because there's so many great practitioners out there. And I noticed, and we talked about this too, Dr. Sarah, that some people they don't exercise and they don't recommend that. So I was like, it'd be really cool to kind of get a panel of physician athletes to dive into this. And then Dr. Alana Shaw and I talked on the phone, and she was on board. So I just wanted to give you the backstory, the impetus for how this kind of came about. So I think let's kind of launch with you, Dr. Drew, since this kind of kicked off the meeting and so on. You've been doing low carb. You've been an athlete for a very long time,
Yep.
and now you're kind of implementing a lot of the intermittent fasted, time-restricted feeding, and into your CrossFit routine. So I'd love to kind of, because you're doing a glycolytic type sport. So recently you're changing more to CrossFit. So how has that been? How has that transition been?
Yeah, it's been an awesome one for me. I'll tell you a bit about the evolution as well, kind of like where I started. Definitely a lifelong athlete. I used to be able to work out 5, 6, 7 days a week. Now that I'm working professional, I don't have as much time for that. And my life used to revolve around food, right? I used to eat like 6, 7, 8 times a day. I thought that was the law. I thought that was the rules I needed to live by. And it worked for quite a long time. But then I also realized like my whole day was tied up into like, what am I eating? What am I going to be eating? I need to keep my metabolism moving. And I was just like a slave to the kitchen, right? And I couldn't actually focus on the things that I wanted to get done. And I was hungry all the time. And I was following like a modified paleo diet, and then in recent years I was like, all right, I'm not going to be able to train as often, so I'll have to modify that, but I'll also have to modify how I approach food. And getting rid of breakfast changed my life, because now I only have to eat like 2, 3 times a day, maybe 4 sometimes if I work out during that day. And the freedom it's given me, the mental clarity it's given me, and the extra time I found by doing it has been awesome. So just restricting those calories into a shorter time frame, not worrying about breakfast, having more freedom and time in the morning has been amazing for me. And then just from a recovery standpoint, in the gym, the amount of DOMs I don't experience anymore, it's been fantastic, because I'm fueling my body in a different way, right? I've repped up different energy systems, and then I can still do the lifts I love, because I'm a powerlifter by trade, played college football, so I was familiar with all those lifts. So the transition to CrossFit, or at least starting to do a bit more of that. I know you're giving me the accolades that I'm a big CrossFitter, but story short, I dabble with it a little bit now, and I still hold on near and dear to the power lifts, because that's really where my heart is, and because that's given me the gift of muscle, that has given me so many other gifts, and opened so many other doors. So can't say enough about that. I recommend it to every patient. Like you said, not a lot of practitioners talk about exercise with their patients. And probably because not a lot of practitioners are exercising, right? So I know if I'm going to be telling every patient, like, do this, do that, get in the gym, go to yoga, find something you love, get that in your life, that I better be doing it too, right? Yeah. I need to make sure that I'm in the gym doing that, setting a good example and making sure that they have something to follow, right? And kind of look up to, because if the doctor doesn't look like they know their way around the kitchen or way around the weight room, that's a huge problem, right? And I see that now. So that's my whole thing. I'm just leading by example and then teaching them along the way. So I'm checking in with that on every patient. And again, can't do it as much as I used to. It's probably like 3-4 days a week now. But the time restricted feeding, backloading my calories, making sure it's just all healthy fats, a little bit of protein in the first half of the day has totally changed my life, changed my metabolism. I lost a lot of weight. I used to be about 205, and for my frame it's a little heavy. It was hard on my joints, and just getting rid of that 15-20 pounds with this intermittent fasting, time restricted feeding has been a game changer for me in a lot of ways. And I can't say enough good stuff about it. So
Yeah. Dr. Shaw, then we can go over to you, Dr. Shura. I think one thing that we hear so much about, people say, women don't really do well on time-restricted feeding, and it messes up your hormones, and then you're going to get reverse T3, and it's going to throw off your thyroid. So what have you found with that, with time-restricted feeding and playing around with that?
Personally?
Yeah, personally, and then with your patients.
I think my practice is a bit unique in that a lot of people I see are actually reproductive age. So with certainly with modifying diets, I'm encouraging a lot of people to do lower carb, higher fat, higher protein, which I find really helpful. A lot of people I work with, I'm not necessarily doing a lot of fasting with them for that reason, because I do find that women struggle a bit more with it than men. Personally, I have found that, like a lot of people I'm working with that are trying to regulate cycles or not ovulating regularly. So I think that I haven't been doing a lot of that with those people.
Sure.
Older women, like women who are not really trying to get pregnant, women who are obese, diabetic spectrum, absolutely trying to work that in a little bit more. But you know, certainly people who don't have a lot of weight to lose. I'm actually not doing a lot of like ketogenic fasting, but more kind of like paleo, high fat, more of a whole foods type approach, more of just healthy diet approach.
It's interesting that you bring that up because there's been some new research that's emerging, at least from practitioners, that anorexia and maybe eating disorders may be mediated in part through ketosis potentially. So those patients that are kind of underweight, you kind of referred to and things like that, you want to steer them more towards kind of the paleo approach and get them to eat more, a little bit more consistently to become more stable. Is that kind of what I heard, or? I
mean, I think it's just trying to get people healthy and take another stress off. It depends entirely on the person. So, you know, it's more for me about quality of food and, you know, not that I'm discouraging people from doing what works for them, but I'm certainly, I'm more, I guess, if you're looking on kind of the idea of like macro versus quality of food, I'm focusing more on quality of food in my practice,
That's awesome. Dr. Sarah, any comments on this topic?
Yeah, I think I see kind of, well, I see a lot of patients. I have a huge athletic group, and then also people who don't exercise, don't eat well. So I have to approach it a little bit differently from them. A lot of people, maybe athletes specifically, are into this high carb, low fat. And then what I see develop is, sure, their body composition might improve or their performance might be fine, but then other things develop like anxiety, or they're not going to be sleeping very well, or their hormones and their cycle will change. And so I have to work with those athletes in shifting them, you know, from a high carb to a more high fat, moderate to low carb diet. In terms of the time restricted feeding and women, I do think that it's different, and I approach it differently with women and men. I don't think women can go as long on their fast. Certainly some can. Again, it depends on activity level, overall health, and so forth. But I always try and encourage people, you know, minimum of 12 hours from your dinner to your next meal, and then try and extend it. You know, I used to be that person or that physician that was like, you got to get up, you got to eat breakfast. And I'm much like Drew. I was myself, you know, working all day, eating all day, exercising, you know, after work, and I was just going crazy trying to get enough food, and my blood sugar was up and down. And it's through kind of adapting or incorporating more time restricted feeding and more fat into my diet that I was able to function better in the day, both with focus and performance. And so I try and teach that.
Do you think that, and this is for no one in particular, all of you potentially, that the body becomes more sensitive to different nutrients? If we start kind of restricting things so it's doing more with less, is that one of the mechanisms that we could say? Because I know a lot of people, it feels like, because I used to do the bodybuilding type thing, like 6 meals a day, protein shakes before bed, like there was just, you know, your whole life revolves around food. And then now, you know, you can maintain that same level of strength and performance with less. So it seems like the nutrient receptors, I mean, your maximum, your ROI on that meal is more. So it's kind of interesting. But let's drill down a little bit. So not everyone needs to do this element of time restricted feeding. If you're training multiple times a day, or, you know, and I think a lot of people tend to change multiple things at once, right? Where they're doing the keto, they do time restricted feeding, they're exercising a lot, they're compressing that feeding window down, and then they're getting dizzy and lightheaded, and there's a lot of that stuff going on. So as practitioners, you know, if people listening right now on the live stream, or anyone here, you know, wants to, you know, make a positive shift, what lever would they, shift first? Start exercising, affecting that feeding window, changing the diet like we talked about. What seems to have like the most ROI with the least amount of damage, would you say?
I think in my practice, it again depends on the patient, but if I can get them eating well and eating good food, and that will motivate them to make other changes and to start exercising. So I start with food.
Just like food quality overall, big picture.
Yeah.
Not really get too nuanced with all the macros and the latest keto and everything. Just like get real food and then just get more nuanced.
I do talk about macros. I don't necessarily get people to count macros right away. It depends where they are. But teaching them what the macros are, what you need when. Yeah.
What about for you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all in context and depends on the person. For some people, if you get an idea of what they're going to stick with. So for some people, their social life is really important to them, and the idea of being really restrictive of, no gluten, no dairy, no this, no that, they're really resistant to that idea. So maybe for those people, starting with a little bit more of an idea of macros or looking more at like, okay, well, you can eat whatever you want as long as it's within these guidelines. If you get the sense that they might do that and stick with it, I find that I'll start with that. Or if someone already, if they struggle with nutrition or something about nutrition, but they're really keen on exercise and you can really pick consistency there. I find when you're looking at when people get success versus the people who don't ever really get ahead, I find it's people that can stay the course with something, find what works for them, and then build off that. So if you can get them to follow macros and then you start educating them about the quality of the food, go with that. Or if they don't want to count anything, they just want to eat as much as they want whenever they want, then maybe starting with the quality of the food first. That's sort of my approach.
So like personalize it based upon their interests and get the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And pick up on wherever that momentum is kind of going and just run with it a little bit more.
Yeah, and see what are they realistically going to follow? Like, are they going to follow macros Monday to Friday and then the weekend like blow up? Then they're not going to get good results. Or, what can they stay on track with?
Awesome.
Yeah, I think I just want to reiterate that the quality is paramount and priority in my opinion. You do have to kind of personalize it to the person, what kind of personality they are. Maybe they're a numbers person, maybe they're a details person, and framing it that way they really get. And they're like, yeah, okay, I can do the calorie counting thing. But I feel for the vast majority of people, starting with that quality is priority. Because then eventually, the counting will come. You're going to get the wrong foods out of the diet that way anyway, because you're improving the quality of the foods, and then things will sort of just sort themselves out as they go. Instead of jumping into like weigh your food and calculate your numbers and get your body fat and lean body mass and crunch numbers, that is one way to do it. And some people have obviously and still do get great success doing that. So it's obviously going to be depending on the person in front of you. But starting with quality, I don't think is ever a bad idea, because as soon as you get high quality foods in there, it's going to be harder for them to overeat. It's going to better balance their metabolism because they're not going to have the wrong kinds of oils coming in, the wrong kinds of carbohydrates coming in, because you've already given them a roadmap of things to select that from a quality standpoint is a high level.
Brilliant. So all of you are doing CrossFit. What do you personally do in terms of like pre and post workout nutrition? Because there's a lot of different conflicting theories. Some people say like you should train fasted because then it spikes growth hormone and all that. Then you need the protein post workout. Like there's so many people are really confused right now when it comes to exercise nutrition. All of you are very physically fit. The anatomy, physiology, the biochemistry. And obviously this changes with the seasons, with age, goals, and all that. But just in general, if you could just say, what, for me, speaking individually, what tends to work for you, pre-workout, post-workout, in terms of staying lean and having a good workout?
Sure. So again, it's evolved for me over the last 10 to 15 years, but I'll kind of give you what's worked for me over this last little while. Yeah, if I haven't had anything 2 or 3 hours prior to the workout, I try and get something in. So it could be something as simple as, half a banana or something like that. And then what I end up doing is I call it peri-workout nutrition, which is not really pre, it's not really post, it's almost during the workout, whether it be a little bit of powdered magnesium, some whey protein powder. I'm a big fan of creatine, huge fan of creatine actually, in fact, now that I mention it. And we're just realizing now, we've been taking it all these years for muscle, but all the degeneration prevention that it also brings as well. So if anyone's struggling with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or just if you want to get like more mental sharpness and mental clarity, it's well studied that the neurons are pretty busy, the same way the muscles are pretty busy too. So you're hitting two systems with that supplement, so that's a fantastic one. And then branched chain amino acids as well. Love that stuff. So that's sort of my peri-workout nutrition. And then certainly after, read countless books on this stuff. Nutrient timing is one that comes to mind. And they would talk about that, that golden hour after workout. And a lot of this stuff has kind of changed over the years. It's like you said, it's kind of up for debate. Do you go into it fasted? There's some mornings now where I just have, the grass-fed butter, a little bit of MCT oil, and then go to the gym. And I've had some fantastic workouts lately doing it that way. So like literally having no carbs and just some healthy fats, and that's been fantastic for me. So I'm dabbling with all this stuff because before I recommend it to someone, I like to do it myself, right? And see how I respond to it, so I can at least talk around it when I'm asked questions about it. I can comment from a personal experience. But certainly, you go into GNCs or Popeyes around here, there's just a wall of supplements, and it's like, where do you start? And I've choked down pretty much every powder and pill that you can imagine over the last 16 or 20 years. So I know what tastes good, I know what doesn't taste good, like glutamine plain, for example. Like glutamine just tastes horrible.
Yeah.
But another beneficial one to consider, right? Because it's preferentially depleted during exercise. And then, of course, there's tons of research around healing the gut lining for it. So never a bad idea to throw that in there as well. But the staples for me are definitely the whey protein powder, the creatine, the BCAAs. And then if you want to reduce DOMS, there's a lot of good research around red tart cherry juice and just having a little bit of that. Yeah, it's a sugar extract. Yeah, it's a little bit higher carb, but obviously if you're doing strength training and you're building muscle and you're spending the tank, that's the time to do it, right? That's the time to get those safe carbs, those safe starches in and around your workout. And that, like I said, that golden hour, a couple hours there, then your muscles are like a sponge anyway, right? And the more muscle you have, the more you can soak these calories up, and the more they'll help drive amino acids into the muscle cell. Like that whole mechanism is slightly insulin dependent, so it's not that we don't want to activate it. That's probably the time you do. It's benefited me really well over the years. I'm not a big fan of dried fruit, but again, like if you're really spending the tank and you're depleting yourself, that small handful of raisins in the right person is kind of just enough to nudge things along, and those are the things that I've found useful for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Dr. Shaw?
Much like Drew, it's been an evolution for me in how I've fueled myself. And not a lot of it was very conscious in the beginning. I used to, when I played varsity basketball, I was that person that was always hungry, and I used to think I needed to eat a granola bar at halftime because I felt like I needed it and I needed to eat. I would be eating in the pregame talk, right, because I felt like I needed the sugar. But I constantly struggled with blood sugar issues forever, and just recently, and it's been more, maybe by accident than anything else, but experimentation, that I've learned that I actually don't like eating before I work out. So I do train more in a fasted state, and I find that I'm better. I feel better. I used to, the closer I eat to training, I feel heavy, I feel lethargic, I'm slow, like I don't do that well. And what I focused more on rather than what I'm eating before I train is kind of what Drew was saying, is what I'm eating while I'm training. So I found that my issues have never been in body composition or building muscle or weight management. Like I've always kind of managed that through my diet, but my nervous system, and as I age, I find that with training, I get more neurological fatigue. I start getting more nauseous in workouts, feeling I get hit by a truck, like with CrossFit. That's kind of one of the concerns you see with people, is that they get burnt out. And so by starting to add in a little bit more, drinks once I hit the hour point of some training, right before you start getting into some metabolic conditioning, I found getting that in has actually helped me and kind of buffered what I feel like. I feel like some of the peri-workout stuff is more about your nervous system, because that's kind of the part that concerns me the most. Is, I see a lot of people that if their nutrition's not right, then they're not sleeping well, they're burning out, they're hitting walls. So my pre-workout might just be coffee and sometimes a banana, and then during the workout, like maybe a shake with some protein, a small amount of carb, And then after the workout, I don't have any kind of workout supplements per se, other than trying to not go a long period without eating, and then in that meal making sure that it's protein, some carbohydrate, not like potato, something sweet potato.
Right. Dr. Kinnan, I want to get to you, but since you're on that topic, would you give that same advice to someone that wanted to lose weight? So you said pre-workout, you're working out really hard. So the goal of exercise is to obviously cause some of that damage, and it's fun, and everything like that. But if someone wants to lose weight, we still do need to build up that muscle because we burn fat inside muscle tissue, right? So is the banana pre-workout, if someone, their goal is weight loss, right?
Yeah.
They want to have a good workout. Is the banana going to, even though they're going to have a good workout, they have this mindset that it's going to make them fat because it contains the carbs. So how do you parse that out with people?
With people? Most people that I'm working with for weight loss aren't training super high level, like they're going to a class.
Meaning they don't need that pre-workout carbohydrate because it's just not intense enough to justify.
I don't find most people are hitting, like they're needing, I mean, if they're feeling really unwell, then we might need to adjust something, but I think it's more for people where you don't have a lot of stores to dig into. So it depends kind of on the person's body composition and then how they're feeling. So if it's someone that really wants to lose weight, I find, go get your body under stress and no, I don't think I would give that same advice.
Right,
probably.
different tips.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's finish. Maybe you could pick up on the neurologic fatigue. I think that's a really interesting concept, and we talked earlier, did a podcast all about, overtraining, and a lot of people that gravitate toward, that become maybe overtrained from CrossFit or whatever, are also burning the needle at both ends, if you want to call it, with their business, with their family, and then they're training really hard, and then they can get this fatigue, like we kind of talked about. So what have you found in your journey with overcoming adrenal fatigue and running a busy business and all that? The intra-workout carbohydrate conversation we just had, has that kind of helped with the recovery so that you don't maybe dip into that overtraining state?
Well, a few things. When I was overtraining, my schedule was a lot different. I would work all day and then go and train for 3 hours after work. So I was nonstop for, from 5 in the morning till 8 at night. Now that I've recovered and I approach it a little bit differently, I actually work out in the morning at 5:30. So my nutrition around working out has completely changed. But what I've found is I'm responding way better in terms of my adrenal fatigue or that stress response. Because it's 5:30, I don't get up and eat anything, but I will make a coffee. I find that I need a little bit of caffeine to even just the placebo effect of being awake, holding it. I will often put some collagen protein into it, just because it dissolves easily, and it's like I'm still drinking my coffee. Sometimes I'll put MCT if I'm going to be doing a longer workout. And then during my workout, I will I'm a big fan of Zymogen's Zymobolics, the amino acid blend. I'll have that in my water, sipping it. And I actually find that that's enough. I have sustained energy, whether I'm doing like more lifting or metabolic conditioning. I'm fine. And then I'm actually now kind of experimenting in that post-workout phase of, okay, well, am I still going to restrict, and wait until I'm actually hungry, which could sometimes be 11 in the morning, or sometimes it's 9, or do I really need to get home and get that meal in that 30 to 60 minute window? Mm-hmm. And I'm finding that it actually isn't affecting my performance at all, and my mental clarity is actually better if I can keep that post-workout meal further away.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You didn't wither away? You're not just... Because if you read a fitness magazine, as everyone knows, if you don't have the protein shake post-workout, then forget about your workout. You're just going to go into this catabolic state and wither away, and all your gains are going to go.
I'm not restricting my calories. I'm not reducing my calories. I'm still getting the same amount of calories in my day, but again, it's in that kind of time restricted. And my strength numbers haven't gone down. My muscle size isn't shrinking. So
Interesting.
that's what I'm experimenting with now. It's almost intuitive eating. If I get home and I'm like, oh, that wiped me out, then I'll maybe eat sooner.
Interesting. Since the microphone's over there, one thing I wanted to address that comes up a lot is hormones, particularly for middle-aged women, going through perimenopause and menopause, hormone fluctuations a lot. And if your hormones are out of whack, I think it's hard to get some of the benefits from exercise, right? I mean, we know hormones play a huge role in body composition, recovery, anabolism, and so forth. So where does that kind of come into the clinical picture here with people that they need to get moving, but they also have hormone dysfunction? And we know that exercise helps to regulate all that too, but like, do we work at these things concomitantly at the same time, or one before the other? From the female perspective, I'd love to get your opinion, because this does come up a lot.
I work on it all at the same time. It's a symphony, and you can't just work on one thing and expect everything else to fall into place. I also find that with the different kind of decades we go through, our metabolism, our hormone levels, everything changes. You're not the same at 30 as you were at 20, at 40 as you were at 30, and so you have to make adjustments, both to diet. And I find I see a lot of the perimenopause and menopausal age range, and I get these like athletes that have said, nothing's changed, I'm doing the same, and my performance is going down, or I'm gaining weight, and well, things have changed.
Internally, you just can't really.
Yeah, and so, we make adjustments. I find, our carbohydrate tolerance decreases as we age, and so often toying with that macronutrient and getting into more a fat-adapted state is better.
And I know it's so personalized, obviously, and we need to test and all that sort of thing, but have you found that for some women it's just as simple as progesterone, or do we need more testosterone? Like, is there any like high hit rate tips that we could offer people, like when it comes to perimenopausal middle-age hormonal shifts?
I mean, I think progesterone falls the fastest. Over age 35, it just starts to plummet. Especially if you are kind of a high functioning, high busy, high stress person, it will fall even faster. And then I do see quite low DHEA and testosterone in that age group, which can affect energy, stamina, muscle mass,
recovery.
Yeah, and so that if I see that's I try and get those patients to start strength training.
But if those androgens are so low, and maybe if anyone here would want to jump in and talk about this, then maybe those people wouldn't get the results from the workout, right? So then it wouldn't be a life-changing habit, potentially. I don't know. I know you work a lot with particularly female hormones. What's your perspective when it comes to the topics that we were just talking about, hormones and exercise and so on?
Yeah, I think it's, I could probably comment on the decade earlier than perimenopause more than anything. Where I think it's interesting is you have different types of people who may have hormone imbalances for different reasons. So you could take someone who's potentially carrying extra weight on the metabolic, the metabolic disease spectrum, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Maybe they have hormone imbalances because they're not ovulating regularly for that reason. And those would be the people where I would, really encourage maybe more high intensity training. Getting active is going to be your number one best medicine you can possibly do. Exercise is, paramount to you. Or you could take someone on the opposite end of, our lean PCOS people who are typically going to be maybe more your overtraining. Maybe they're doing the wrong kinds of exercise or not. They might be the people that go run on the treadmill for
hours and hours,
don't take rest days, don't nourish their bodies properly, and so they put their body in a stress state. So those people, you may be asking them to train less. You might be saying, okay, I need you to focus on shorter, maybe and I often say shorter, higher intensity, and it's stressful for a short period of time, but our bodies seem to do better sometimes with short bouts of stress rather than this long, prolonged, which is what stresses the nervous system, which is what usually affects ovulation and hormones. So I think changing the types of exercise helps people a lot, and also people's perspective on the exercises. So if someone really, it's about, again, finding what people enjoy doing, what brings people joy.
Right.
So I think exercise has so many benefits. You're never going to go wrong getting people to move. And then also stressing the difference between activity and exercise is that even just getting people active is important. And then on top of that, there's getting your heart rate up. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's
exactly,
brilliant.
but-
So if I heard you correctly, so kind of this maybe late 20s to maybe 40 crowd would do a lot better, maybe not jump to hormone replacement right away. Their hormone dysregulation may be because insulin dysregulation, fat tissue conversion, creating estrogen and aromatase and leptin and all that good stuff. So we need them actually moving more, making dietary changes to affect then the hormonal axis. But as we go beyond 40, maybe that could be a time to look at bioidenticals or things along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, when you can't regulate with the then you can get people's ovaries going, or you can, if they lose fat, then they can lose the. You have more of an estrogen dominance. But as people age and maybe their adrenals aren't producing hormones, their ovaries aren't producing hormones, and then maybe look into that more. But
so I think you were being polite about it, but you referred to like the skinny PCOS. Would that be the same as? So we hear the metabolically obese, normal weight individual. So we think about. There's this whole thing, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, the obesity paradox. My brother-in-law is an interventional cardiologist, and sometimes he'll go and stent someone that's really overweight and their arteries are squeaky clean, right? And then in contrast, someone that's, rail thin in their 50s or 60s and is totally occluded in the arteries. So you were talking about like the kind of skinny fat. That's what a lot of people on the street know it to be. So that skinny PCOS, out of the folks that the female clients you have that have PCOS, what percentage roughly, if you know off the top of your head? Because in the studies that I read, about 20% of the lean people are metabolically obese. They're skinny on the outside, fat on the inside. Does that reflect in your practice with that?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And with the PCOS population, a lot of those people you can look. You don't need like fancy measurement tools. You can look, and you're seeing abdominal obesity. They might not be, their BMI might not be high. They might not, the doctors might be saying, not telling them they need to lose weight, but you can look at someone's waistline and know. And that's very different than that. And those people, I think you're still giving them the advice of, weight loss, exercise. The lean PCO people I'm talking about are actually probably your athletes, your marathon runners, where they have more of a chronic anovulatory condition, but it's more based on a nervous system dysfunction rather than more than a metabolic. They're not really falling on the metabolic syndrome spectrum. So I think maybe then we're categorizing 3 kinds of people.
Interesting. Okay, so you're referring to more than overtraining induced hormone issues.
Yes.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we have some men listening to the live stream, so maybe we can talk about hypogonadism, because we're seeing, I hear from doctors more and more, men in their 20s and so forth are coming in with testosterone levels of 92, like 70-year-old men. So,
Huge problem.
is it as simple as just getting men to exercise more and sleep more, or is there more to the story?
Well, there's definitely more to the story, and the thing is the educational piece that I think you're just kind of alluding to there, because if they're not educated on how this is going to go, they kind of come in a certain way thinking, okay, I just need some testosterone or I just need some exercise. They try and really simplify it, right? But if we don't take a multi-system approach, because as a naturopathic physician, I can't just go, we'll just plug in some testosterone here or maybe some tribulus or maca and all that's going to be good, because that's just a replacement model, right? But we need to look at a multi-system model where we're looking at the gut, the liver, the fatty acids, the cholesterol is the building bone, or the backbone for all this, right? It's the building block. And so I showed this chart to every patient, and I'm like, it starts with diet, it starts with nutrition. These are all fat soluble. You can't just plug testosterone here and think that everything is going to be good and fine. Because the odd person that tries it, guess what? They come back and they're just like, not any better. Still tons of fatigue. Still not, good with athletics, and their ability to tolerate sports is decreasing, right? Falling asleep after dinner. They just don't have the oomph anymore. And so you got to educate them on this is a multi-system approach, right? Sleep is a big one because of the circadian rhythm, and we know that anytime you're treating hormones, you have to look at the adrenal glands. So this is a huge, huge problem. Like we're seeing in many ways like the death of man, right? Like, I don't know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to be said about this. We could have an hour conversation on that alone, but I'm seeing that the masculine energy is slowly starting to evaporate in many, many ways, and it's very concerning, right? Because I'm just in my early 30s, but I got guys coming in 5-10 years younger than me, and it's just like, man, what's happening? Like they're fizzling away, right? So this is a huge concern. there's a big opportunity for practitioners like me and then the two with me here right now, like to really try and spearhead this and fix it, because the food, the water, right, the PCBs, the phthalates, the EMFs is another huge one here, because if we're not getting the cause, no testosterone injection will fix it. You're crazy to think that, but a lot of people attempt to do it that way. So yeah, tons of avenues we can approach this from. Exercise is just one part of it, because you want to do those big, heavy, complex, compound movements to stimulate muscle, to stimulate growth hormone and testosterone. There's no reason you wouldn't want to include that. Right. But when sometimes that's not enough, you got to look at these other avenues. Okay, fix their sleep, fix the liver, fix the gut. Do they have enough omega-3 fatty acids coming in? Insulin's a big one, right? Because that'll crank out more aromatase. Testosterone will flow to estrogen, it'll flow to DHT. Like it'll go every which way except where you want it sometimes, right? Because that's not the problem. There's other metabolic machinery issues, environmental stuff, right? Whether it be the toxins or the EMS that you gotta get out of there. And so you have to look under every rock in that case for that person and really kind of figure out like where is the weak link in the chain and where is it breaking down. So I talk to them about all that and I try and educate them and say this is a process. This isn't just run this test, replace what's low and see you later. We got to look at these other things too, right?
Yeah, very good point. I'd love to finish off. I know we're probably going to have some questions here,
Sure.
especially on the live stream. But one thing we didn't mention that I think is woven into this whole discussion is all the endocrine disrupting chemicals that you were just referring to, because those really affect hormone imbalances and all that. So I see on Instagram, I watch people in the fitness community cooking and so forth, and they have the nonstick pans, everything's in plastic. So we have lotions and creams and perfumes and all that. In comparing those, elimination of those products, weighting that with exercise and all that, like how important is that to like detox all those synthetic compounds?
I would say it's important, but maybe not as important as some of the things I just mentioned, but definitely Joe Pizzorno's the one that really turned me on to this. So anytime we go to the conference and seminars, I always make sure to check out his talks, because he's shown a lot with his research that people always think it's the diabetes because of high carb, high sugar, but he's made some really good arguments that insulin receptor is getting tied up by all these toxins. So then you have to crank out more insulin. Then you become insulin resistant for a different reason than we once thought, right? So very interesting stuff there. Yeah, the PCBs, the phthalates, the xenoestrogens, all that stuff matters. 4-Hour Body, Tim Ferriss, he had a similar problem way back in the day. I read his book in 2010, and he talked about how he came up with low testosterone, like low sperm count and all that. So he went down all these rabbit holes. Was it the phthalates? Was it the PCBs? Was it the xenoestrogens? Clean up the diet, clean up the water, retested, made a difference, but not as much as he would hope, right? He really thought that he was going to hit a home run with that, and he hit more like a single with it, and was like, not really happy with that. His big thing was the EMF one, oddly enough. So from an environmental, endocrine disruption standpoint, that was the big one for him. So I've been doing a lot of research around this lately. Cell phones in the pocket, horrible idea. So if you're a guy, do not let your boys down there cuddle with a cell phone. It's a horrible idea. So when I read about this in 2010, I don't do that anymore, because he took it away, he retested his levels, and then within 60 days, tripled sperm counts, motility, morphology, testosterone levels. It's like having a little microwave down there. Bad idea.
What about putting your cell phone in the bra?
Just as bad. Or for your heart.
Yeah.
So you have a heart there, you have breast tissue there. Huge stuff coming out now showing that's a massive problem, because it disrupts the voltage-gated calcium channels in the heart. So you get this huge influx of calcium, which then just cranks up nitric oxide. You get all these free radicals. Same thing in the testicles. So you have a lot of voltage-gated calcium channels there too. So a teacher of mine, Dr. Bob, older guy, 65, he's one of our elder doctors. And every time I teach with him, because I assist with the manipulation classes, puts his phone right there. And I've told him like 5 times, I'm like, Bob, get that phone away from your heart. I want you here another 30 years at least, and get that away. You need to look after your ticker. So he slips it out of his pocket, front pocket, and puts it in his pant pocket. And I said, now let me educate you about something else here, Bob. Your testicles, that's a problem too. And I'm like, your wife probably wants me to knock you down a peg, but huge problem with this stuff, right? It's massive, and the research is coming. So on my handout, I give all my guys that have hormone issues, that I'm working up hormone stuff with them, it has the little EMF spiel. I don't mean to soapbox too much, but it's there, and it talks about get the phone out of there, or put it in airplane mode, They're talking about Ethernet wiring houses now, and man, I'm tangenting so many levels.
No, it's good. But it's,
Like I said, we gotta have a whole talk about this, right?
yeah, especially in Vancouver. I mean, I just checked the Wi-Fi to get the live stream going. I think there was 27 or something Wi-Fi signals.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of different Airbnbs around here, Vancouver, and New York, Manhattan, Seattle, and it's like if you live in a cool area, if you're a 20-something, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
you're getting bombarded, or everyone is getting bombarded with Wi-Fi. So what are you doing about it?
People are more susceptible than others, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all kind of, if we're living around here, similar dose, but you know, just like anything, the genetics are different, and some people are just a little more resilient to it. But place I live, like 22 Wi-Fi's around me. So like, yeah, I turn my Wi-Fi on, and it doesn't matter. I'm just getting hammered from every angle, right? You can get these things that you put under your mattress to try and absorb the radiation coming up from under. That's like $1,500, $2,000 per bed. So there's things you can do. You can paint the walls with stuff that they don't block and blunt this stuff. But anyway, the reason you asked was about the toxins, but that is a big part of it. In the experiment I referred to in the 4-hour body, it wasn't enough, and the big thing was definitely the EMF stuff. But certainly from a toxin standpoint, get all that stuff out. I do chelation therapy sometimes with patients if this is just a huge enough burden. Heavy metals is another one that some people can just get rid of a little faster than others. Because we all have these mechanisms within, but when they get jammed up, you might need to open them.
Yeah.
And so it's all about therapeutic order, right? Starting at the bottom, working up, and then maybe you reach for some of these big dog therapies when necessary.
Right.
But the EMF one is an important health topic that not a lot of people are talking about, but it's coming.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and now there's better ways to quantify it. And actually, so your smart meter outside, so your power company is constantly wanting to figure out how much, well, they want to send you a bill, for your usage, and that really emits a lot of EMFs and so forth. So I was on a plane ride with I don't know the exact position, but he analyzes electrical deaths, so deaths caused by electricity, whether someone, sticks their finger in a socket or somebody short circuits, and so he flies all around the country. That's his job. And we started talking about airplane seats, and so underneath the airplane seats are all those, because a lot of airplanes now have your phone charger around it, which is so convenient. You can charge your phone or your laptop, but he said that's a huge source. No one wants to come out and admit it, but the airplane seats are, speaking of your boys down there, or whatever you're trying to use, it can be really, really bad news bears for both men and women. But make sure your patients are not sleeping near the smart meter in their home. So if that can be a big,
Because that'll disrupt sleep.
yeah,
Huge
sleep
disruption in
and
sleep from this stuff, yeah.
yeah. So he's had a lot of cases that way. So any final thoughts on some of the toxins and EMF and anything like that you all wanted to share? Or?
No, just, we'll pass it off to the girls here, but no different for women. A lot of people like keep their laptops and stuff there, and we got horrible, cycle issues, short periods, long periods. I'm certainly no specialist there, so I'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
Yeah, I know, I think Drew's bang on with, as someone who does a lot of reproductive health, seeing male fertility become more and more and more of an issue. So everything that Drew said, I think, is important that we pay more attention to. And then for women, whenever we're looking at anything estrogen sort of related, where these hormone disruptors, so all the people I'm seeing with fibroids and endometriosis, any of these proliferative type things, that there are more and more studies coming out that are connecting that these chemicals might be related to these conditions as well.
Yeah. So filtered water, organic food, all that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Alana and Drew said. I do talk about it with every patient. I think we need to kind of address the full picture. Not just hormone-wise too, but even if somebody, we're seeing more and more allergies every year. Everybody's allergic to something, and I remember Dr. Pizzorno saying, if you have allergies, your immune system is toxic. It's overburdened, and I know if I can clean up toxins going in, your body's better able to get rid of its burden of toxins, and so that's been a big part of my practice as well, improving. I know in my own case, somebody who suffered from asthma since I was an infant. My life is completely different, living clean.
Right.
drives me crazy when people heat their food in their microwave with
Oh my
saran
gosh.
wrap.
Yeah, so many people use plastic in the microwave.
Double whammy, yeah.
Yeah, that's, well, I haven't had a microwave for like 15 years, but anyway, it's very interesting stuff. So there's a lot of high hit rate things that people can do. And one thing that I noticed that's emerging in research-wise, and we can get to some questions, is people that exercise around rush hour and are exposed to all the diesel fume exhaust and things like that. I used to do a lot of competitive bike racing, and I did a heavy metals test. This was back in like 2004, and my arsenic, lead, cadmium was like through the roof, and but was eating really, really clean. And I just chalked it up and started to research the chemicals that are in diesel fume and car exhaust, and there's a lot of those metals there. So I think that's something to remind patients too. It's like, okay, it's great that you're exercising and moving, but are you running near a freeway? Or are you running in your office building or something, or doing treadmill work and there's no outside air, so just that recycled air. So yeah, we've been talking for a lot of great information. I want to thank you all, and then see if we have any questions from any of you, or input or insights or different perspectives. Yeah.
I did have one question. I think it was Dr. Shaw, I believe. I think he mentioned that for women of reproductive age, there were, I think you alluded to, there were a set of sort of challenges that you were experiencing. And I'm not sure what you were alluding to there, and I wondered if there was, if I heard you correctly, was there something there that you could characterize a little bit more to help us understand what was going on there?
What's going on? I think what I was alluding to is a large percentage of the, I guess in my practice, it's biased towards, I see a lot of people, infertility is a huge part of my practice, and a lot of the people I'm seeing are under the category of unexplained, in an unexplained category. So, I mean, we talk a lot about the male side of things, but when it comes down to female side of things, I'm seeing a lot of people with issues related to ovulation. And, this whole idea of a luteal phase defect where, people, they're not making enough, say, progesterone in the second half of their cycle. And a lot of that comes from pituitary hormones, and a lot of that's related to the nervous system. So when you're seeing people who are kind of on that spectrum, sometimes I find that any kind of diet that may potentially increase cortisol or put a stress on the nervous system may not be the best thing at that time for that person. So some people do really well with it, but sometimes if people are I'm not using that as a therapeutic tool for those, say, fertility type people. And I have found those are some of the people where I actually do find that fasting may put too much of a stress on their body at that time. So, maybe one day here and there doing it, but if they're consistently, under eating or restricting their meals a lot, I do find that actually, having a longer feeding period for those people, and maybe even